Hello and welcome to Color Multimedia Enterprises. I am going to be creating just a small vlog, I suppose you could call it. And one of the main reasons why is because I have a few updates regarding HaxeLive and perhaps going back to doing some Hex tutorials, because I actually kind of miss doing those tutorials, quite frankly. But let's just go straight on into this presentation and tell you what I have been doing. For those of you who have been following me on Twitter, you should know that I have been working with, well, sort of, with the HaxeWidgets library and implementing new features to make it a viable solution to creating native desktop applications for, well, Hex, because obviously Hex needs more tools, it needs more libraries, essentially to make it a viable solution to specific people in the industry, right? And one of the reasons to contribute to HaxeWidgets is to ensure that it's implemented into HaxeLive. So I have been in fact working on the HaxeLive engine a bit. I've got the live previewing functionality mostly working in HaxeWidgets. I still need to implement the whole scene gen and the exporter and stuff, so it's going to take a while until that's finished, obviously. But until that's done, I'm not actually going to be going back to the HaxeLive editor, and I will in fact be using HaxeWidgets. So the HaxeLive editor is actually going to be on pause for a bit until that's done. So I apologise for any inconvenience there. And essentially, obviously, as I mentioned, it's going to be available in the editor as well. So one of the reasons why is because OpenFL just simply doesn't provide the native UI features and utilities that I need to use it with the editor. One of the biggest additions to using HaxeWidgets is that it's mainly just an extern for WX widgets, as you may be aware, and it's just simply using the specific controls that I need for the HaxeLive editor. And one of those controls, the styled text control, would be a huge help, which would provide syntax highlighting for specific things to make code look easier to read. I'm not going to go insane with autocompletion and stuff like that, but I mean, the general idea is just have this editor that helps you use HaxeLive, basically, so you don't have to touch these JSON files anymore. The HaxeLive editor will do all of that for you, right? And on the subject of the HaxeLive editor, I'm also going to be implementing some more things into the HaxeLive engine as and when I need it, when I start creating and going back to the editor eventually. So one of the things that I'm going to be implementing is the use of HScript for event handling. And the idea behind that is you create an event, you attach it to a component, and you just code away, right? At least that's the general idea. So there will be some form of scripting element there. Of course, all of that scripting stuff will essentially be converted into Hex code eventually when you come to export and build your solution, so you'll still have that same implementation in place, essentially, effectively, perhaps, something like that. Then there's also property handling as well. Now, I did initially go into that sort of using HScript, but I decided to go against the way that I was doing it, mainly because HScript doesn't really provide the functionality that I actually need in order to do property handling, because if you read about my scene gen exporter and thingy article on my website, I can't remember what the name is now for some reason, but it was about HaxeLive 1.2, and the exporter was going to feature a variety of different things that I was mentioning in that article, and one of those things was property handling. And the way that I structured the JSON in that article was that you had a get field and a set field that would give you the ability to access specific components specific to that particular JSON file, right? So you would be able to actually access a field in that property, and you would have a function that would allow you to access it, sort of. But the way that I was handling it or implementing it originally was probably not the best idea. So what I'm probably going to do is create possibly a type def with a get and set field, and possibly a type field, and obviously a name. And the get and set fields are probably just going to be functions that do internal handling in order to get and set specific things, just to make life a bit easier. So all of that will be done internally, but you'll still have access to it within HScript and the code and stuff like that. So it'll all export properly as you would expect, right? And another thing that I also want to talk about is Hex tutorials. Now, there is quite a lot of resources online regarding Hex, but the way that it's approached is that it assumes that the reader is already familiar with programming, which is not particularly, it's not a bad idea. I mean, the Hex manual itself does throw a lot of computer jargon at you, so it doesn't really aim it at beginners, if I may be honest. It's more sort of, okay, do you know programming? Okay, good. Here, learn Hex, right? And to be fair, Hex isn't exactly the best language to get started with, mainly because some of the concepts of programming that are familiar to C, C++, and C# programmers just simply don't exist in Hex. Like for loops, for example, they don't. The way that for loops are work in Hex is different to the way in which C, C++, and C# do it. You also have this macro system which C++ has, but C doesn't, and C# sort of partially has and doesn't at the same time. It's kind of weird, but the macro system is, again, it's very, very complex. Even I don't fully understand it, to be honest, but yeah. So and another problem with Hex is the way that it's being marketed. Now, a lot of people, they'll take a look at Hex, they'll invest time into it, they'll invest time in learning it, but a lot of employers don't know what Hex is, right? They don't know what this language is, even though you do have people like Massive Interactive, BBC, and big companies that do in fact use Hex, but only a minority of the developers within those companies, except for of course Massive, which actually does develop Hex libraries full time. In some of the more bigger companies like Mozilla, who actually actively support Hex, they don't even talk about it, right? They're still selling JavaScript, you know. Mozilla doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, they don't talk about Hex. They actually don't, which is really odd and ironic considering they're actually supporting it. And then you've got companies like, as I said, the BBC, who use televised solutions from Massive Interactive that create these sort of perhaps iPlayer on smart TVs, probably written in Hex. We don't know that. Perhaps they do. But they don't talk about it. Which is really odd. It's like, why use Hex and not talk about it? You know, it's not exact. It's not saying that it's a bad language. It's just people aren't talking about it. Okay, and that's actually one of the big problems with people in general. Is that, okay, I like this product, it works, therefore I'm not going to talk about it. It's like, unless it's groundbreaking and phenomenal, people just don't talk about it. And I think that's a very big problem. A lot of people just simply don't talk about the things they enjoy using, unless the subject is brought up in some way. And that's a very big problem. So Hex needs to be sold better. It needs to be marketed better. And the way that it's currently being marketed is, personally, it's not the best way that is. But I mean, you take a look at the Hex website, right? The first thing you see is the Hex logo, and it says Hex is a cross-target, cross-platform toolkit to build things, right? But that's all it says. That's essentially the selling point. It's like, what is that telling people? What problem are you trying to solve exactly, right? The very first thing that you should see on the front page of any website is what the product is and how that product is going to benefit you, right? The very first rule in marketing is, don't sell a product, sell a solution to a problem. That's what you're doing. You're selling a solution to a problem. Hex is not doing that on its front page. It's not doing that. So it's not marketing it the way that a business should, right? Because at the end of the day, Hex is a product, but the way that it's being marketed is, it is a product, and it's not really doing anything else in that regard. It helps people do certain things. Obviously, when Hex started, it initially started as being a successor to ActionScript 3 and Flash, because OpenFL came about, right? OpenFL and Enemy, well, Enemy really first. Enemy was one of the very first libraries created with Hex, right? And it became a massive success. It mimicked the native media engine, I think it was called. It mimicked the Flash API. Same with OpenFL as well, which is obviously the successor to Enemy. But at that time, only Flash developers knew about it, right? And it started to grow and grow and grow. Okay, wow. Okay, so I can use this OpenFL library, I can learn this language, and I can now create video games. So I can create video games using the same Flash API that I understand in desktop environments, Linux, Mac, Windows. I can put it on mobile devices, I can put it on BlackBerry, I can almost now put it on consoles, you know? There's so many different targets and platforms that you can build video games on. But because it started out like that, it's being sold as if it's some kind of video game development solution, which is not particularly good, because Hex is not specific to its particular goals. It's specific in the sense that it wants to have a lot of variety in terms of its backends. It wants to be able to just have lots of different backends, and you just choose what backend you want to build onto, and then you just allow it to generate the code for you, right? And it just does it. It will do all the compilation, it'll go through all the errors that you might have, and it will generate the code, and it will just work. And that is a great thing. But again, the way that it's being marketed is not the best, and it needs to be marketed a bit better, right? Good news is the Haxe Foundation is going to be getting a CEO, so perhaps there'll be someone there who will be able to market it a bit more effectively, someone who knows his business, someone who probably has more experience than I do when talking about marketing Haxe. But at the same time, we still need people talking about Haxe. The very first thing is marketing, how to market effectively, communication, press releases. In fact, communication has got to be at the top, right? Always communicate across to your users, always, at least once a week, right? I mean, when you take a look at the Haxe news website, which there barely is any, but when you take a look at its sort of release section, you see, okay, this is what it's doing, this is what's going to happen, and that's it. We've got Haxe.io, which is a news website, sure. But a good thing is, I think there should be an RSS feed in Haxe.org that links back to Haxe.io, which is in fact the news and information resource website for Haxe, specifically for Haxe. You get news, you get updates about what people are doing in the Haxe community, you get things like events, WWX 2016 coming up, and all manner of different things. So many different things going on, but people don't talk about it. Yeah. Again, communication, very, very important. So yeah, market Haxe better. And lastly, I just want to do more tutorials. I think Haxe, it's good to program in Haxe, and I think it's a good programming language to use, but it's certainly not the programming language to start with, because at the end of the day, regardless of what target you're going to use, you're still going to have to learn some basic core understanding of how programming in general actually works. And obviously the best way to do that is to learn a low-level language such as C. Although that being said, C is still technically high level, but obviously not as high level as Haxe, but still, C probably still a good idea to learn it and understand how that works before moving on to Haxe, so that you get a better understanding of how just computers work, really, because obviously if you don't know how a computer works, how on earth are you going to program, you know? Simple as that, really. So yeah, more tutorials, more Haxe tutorials, more might do some C tutorials to get people started. I might even just go full on, why not? Oops. So yeah, and that is going to be pretty much it for me. So thank you for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed. This was a bit of an update, and I probably will start doing Haxe tutorials, in fact tomorrow, for all I know. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.